Hello and welcome to TL Blue, your fortnightly cybersecurity podcast focused on important cybersecurity news for Australian organisations. My name is Brad Morgan and I'm the Triskel Labs Security Operations Centre Manager. As always, today I'm joined by Richard Granger, the Triskel Labs Global DFIR Lead. Rich, what have we got on the agenda for today?
A couple of topics to run through today, Brad. We're going to be talking about Microsoft delaying their release of Recall, which we discussed in our episode last week.
Yep. All I can think about at the moment is remember the movie Total Recall?
Yeah. Microsoft Recall's Recall.
That's it. I just have that scene where he's getting the probe out, right? Extracting the probe very painfully, replaying every time I hear Recall at the moment. So.
Yep.
Awesome.
ASD have released their blueprint for secure clouds. I know you're excited to talk about that one as well.
Yeah. And I'm also throwing an update that they sent out to some other documents as well. So excited to cover that one off.
Probably one of the most important and talked about topics, I think, for this week at least, has been the Australian Information Commissioner v Medibank filing to the Federal Court of Australia. So we'll pull that one apart a little bit as well.
Yeah, that one's huge. Some of that insight is absolutely invaluable to organisations, and I think it demonstrates lessons that organisations need to go and look at and learn from. Unfortunately, it was a very bad time for Medibank, and not fall victim to those same sorts of occurrences, same sorts of things.
Yep, 100%. Vulnerability to Fortnite, we have a trio of Vcenter remote code execution vulnerabilities, so we'll discuss those a little bit.
Yes. And
finally, we will wrap things up with talking about news from the SOC and DFIR over the last fortnight.
Excellent. There's been a lot happening, a lot we can't talk about, but there's a few things there that we can touch on, so I'm excited to get down to that section as well. Look, I hopefully put an image in a few people's heads. Those of us that were born in the 80s and can remember the movie Total Recall. Microsoft has recalled or delayed the release of Recall. It seemed like everyone in the security industry was taking the opportunity to bash Microsoft for this one. And it really felt like only a matter of time before they did pull this. Let's dive into this one a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so Microsoft came out and said that instead of having Recall sort of more broadly available for Copilot Plus computers on the 18th of June, they've actually said in a blog post that they're going to be making it available only for preview on its Windows Insider program in the coming weeks instead. They also went on to say that the decision is, quote, rooted in our commitment to providing a trusted, secure, and robust experience for all customers, and to seek additional feedback prior to making the feature available to all Copilot Plus PC users.
Yeah, that to me screams we didn't think internally about our new push to be, security orientated before we released this. And I'm glad to see it's going to Windows Insider, and hopefully the feedback that they're going to get is that it is not from what we're seeing from people out in the industry, not an overly secure implementation of a feature that no one asked for.
Yeah.
So, I know we've had conversations that there may be some privacy regulator issues here as well. Can you shed some light on that one?
Yeah, I think, obviously we're not lawyers, so we can't sort of delve too much into it. But I know that there was some sort of questions around GDPR and how Recall is potentially going to be impacted by that. So I'm sort of wondering whether there's a couple of privacy regulators that have been sort of sniffing around, asking questions to Microsoft about this. I wonder if some of that's maybe played into this a little bit in terms of their sort of delay in making it more broadly available.
Yeah, look, we can only hope, and hopefully they learn some lessons and take this away. And if they do persist, make sure it's going to be a secure implementation, and in ways that people actually want to see it. It does have a place where it may be usable, but I said last time I won't be letting my kids use it, and I definitely won't be allowing it on any of the machines in my team. It's far too risky. And as you said at the top, talking about a release from the ASD, and this is their blueprint for secure cloud.
Yeah, so Australian Signals Directorate, or ASD, essentially have released their blueprint, they call it, for secure cloud. It's essentially an online tool that you can use to design, configure, and deploy a sort of secure cloud and hybrid workspace. They're currently focusing on M365, but hopefully, I think that's obviously probably because it's the most popular cloud platform out there. But hopefully, they'll also be looking at some GCP and AWS stuff down the track as well. But it's all about providing sort of guidance for not only government organizations, but also enterprise industry as well, all the way down to sort of small and medium businesses that do obviously utilize these services as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken previously about just how complex some of these deployments can be. And if you are a small business and you're going into this without much budget, having a tool like this at your disposal, I think, will be quite useful. I haven't sort of have time to go and dive into the tool and open it up and get across it. But if it's in line with anything else the ASD's released, their stuff they put out is normally really, really good. And it's user-friendly right from day one. So, kudos to them. And I'm excited to see that one having some impact out in the industry.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to have out there. Obviously, the more secure these environments are being designed with this in mind, I think it's better outcome for everyone.
That's it. And if they can start that now, it gets us closer to a secure by design future, right? So
by 2030.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, something else to go along with that was a recent update to ASD's information security manual. So, along the same lines, the information security manual is a really, really useful tool provided by ASD. But I wanted to call out a couple of the high level items that they touched on. And one of the ones is something that we're always banging on about, and it's multi-factor authentication. I'll read this exactly what they've got here in the summary they released. A new control recommending that when MFA is utilized, that all other authentication protocols that don't support MFA be disabled. A new control recommending that when MFA is used to protect sensitive or classified systems, users are only allowed to enroll to MFA from trustworthy devices. So, I think that's a brilliant control to start putting in place, because when you are using MFA, there's no need for legacy authentication anymore. The conditional access control policy guidance that we put out recently does talk about disabling legacy authentication and those sorts of things, because you shouldn't have it in the environment if you're enforcing MFA, because you're just begging for the threat actors to be able to get in through a method that you might not be watching for anymore. So there's also sorry.
I was just going to say, I like the guiding in there as well around MFA can only be enrolled from trustworthy devices, because we do often see threat actors, enrolling their own phones and things like that in compromised mailboxes for MFA. So.
Yeah, we've had a lot of clients having to go to users and confirm if particular mobile numbers belong to them at the moment. And that's not through anything wrong we're doing. It's just session token theft is so prevalent at the moment. We had one today. We picked up an intrusion, and within 8 minutes the account was locked out. In my view, that's still a little bit too long, but we don't live in an ideal world, right? So, but they can still register a new device in that period of time, because it's part of their workflow is to go through, as soon as they're in there, go and work out their mechanism to ensure they've got continual access. So anyway, look, the other areas of note on this one is there is a greater focus on OT. operational technology. So that's going to be quite interesting. And they're recommending that a new control recommending that an organization's CISO provides cybersecurity leadership on OT cybersecurity in addition to their traditional leadership role for IT cybersecurity. So there's going to be a lot of CISOs out there learning about SCADA and OT and things like that to make sure that they're taking that into account when they're looking at their cyber. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yep. Agreed.
Cool. Look, there's a few other things there. We'll put the links in the show notes. I highly recommend having a read of these. And if you haven't read the ASD's information security manual, it's pretty big, but at least get familiar with it and understand what it is. Look, okay, this is the juicy one, right? This is the one that we really want to talk about this week. And this is the Australian Information Commissioner versus Medibank.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to let you take this one.
Yeah, so for a bit of background context for those who may not be familiar with this, but obviously Medibank had a fairly significant breach in 2022 that has been talked about extensively. It was front page coverage for quite a significant period of time. And on the 14th of June, the Australian Information Commissioner filed a concise statement in the Federal Court of Australia. And essentially what it is it's fairly, I think the name sort of gives away concise, but it does reveal a large amount of facts related to the breach that Medibank experienced in 2022. And it's got some key details which previously had not been publicly available. So it's very interesting in that regard. I think one of the sort of key things that sort of come out from this, and we'll talk about as well when we sort of get into discussion around this article or this document, is initial access has been traced back to a Medibank contractor who had been compromised by of some variant of malware, and that they've actually redacted the malware it was, but I'm guessing it's probably going to be some kind of info stealer like Redline or something like that.
Which, I mean, let's be honest, Snowflake's having a horrible time with that at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So this breach was 2022. 2024, stealers are still pretty popular method. So yeah, so I just wanted to tie that to current events. So stealers are always a concern for me.
Yeah, and we've seen ransomwares that were, initial access was through information stolen through a steal like this. So yeah, it's quite prevalent. One of the key points in here as well, which we can talk about, which is very pertinent to the stealers, is that apparently the Medibank contractor saved his Medibank username and password for a number of Medibank accounts to his personal internet browser profile on the work computer he used. And then when he subsequently signed into his internet browser profile on his personal computer, those Medibank credentials were then synced across to his personal computer as well.
I mean, I had a little bit of a rant in our last episode about BYOD devices. And that sort of thing. And if you're going to be doing work, you should be working on a work device. Syncing of accounts across devices is turn it off. If you have that on in your environment now, please go and turn it off. There is zero need, and stop users from saving credentials into browsers.
Yeah.
Like that, there are tools out there that can do this almost silently. Like, it is scary how efficient these tools are. And if you don't want to be lumped into a sack with Medibank, when it's all done and when it's all said and done out in the wash, you need to take these steps that have been called out in this report or in this filing to make sure you're not seen in the same light. And that is a big one. And look, I mean, I feel for the security team, they may not have even known, because that could be the ops team, right? You just don't know the makeup of the organization. Security might not have had any idea that there were no controls around that.
Yeah. I think just something that you touched on there is I think this is a very important document for anyone that's involved in any kind of security for an organization to read and go through and understand and see exactly how these kinds of incidents can occur, and take the learnings from these as well, because there's so many things that are in this document that you can sort of take away and see and be like, all right, well, this happened. So what controls do we have in our organization to combat these particular things?
Yeah, exactly. Or are we doing the same thing?
Mm.
If you see yourself doing the same thing that someone's just been called out for in a court filing, probably not a great idea to let it keep happening.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate, I cut you off there because there's other bullet points here that you wanted to go through.
Well, the next one is
don't get me started.
Access to Medibank's Global Protect VPN did not require 2 or more proofs of identity or multi-factor authentication, MFA. Rather, Medibank's Global Protect VPN was configured so that only a device certificate or a username and password, such as the Medibank credentials for that IT contractor, was required. So again, there was no enforcement of MFA on the VPN. The one thing that, is allowing people to get into and access your internal network. So this is something we see all the time. I think we talk about this every episode we have of TL Blue, but you need to have MFA on your VPN.
You do.
Working on a number of ransomware engagements at the moment where threat actors were able to access the environment through the VPN. There was no MFA on there.
Yep. It scares me. I had a client that we're onboarding at the moment, not a former DFIR client. They're just a direct client. Asked me today. We're looking at new firewalls. The firewall does VPN and other functions. What's your thoughts between 40 and Paolo? And I said, I don't really mind what brand you go with, Paolo, but I want to know the logging capability on the VPN. That to me, at the moment, that is the single greatest concern from a security point of view when you're spinning up a VPN. You need to have appropriate logging to detect what is happening on that VPN. You need to detect failed authentication attempts. You need to be able to put geo controls over it. You need to be able to have conditional access and all that sort of thing. And ideally, it's SSO'd back to Azure. Because then you can control that from one single location. It's all controlled. And if you're considering a new firewall or a new VPN and it can't single sign on it with Azure, just roll it out. Unfortunately, and I know budget is an issue, but I think that's the way that we have to be looking at things at the moment.
Yeah, agreed. Another interesting point that was detailed in the document is, during the relevant period, the admin account had access to most, if not all, of Medibank systems, including network drives, management consoles, and remote desktop access to Jumpbox servers used to access certain Medibank directories and databases. So it looks as though, this one's an interesting one because obviously it sounds like this person was employed as a service desk operator. So there's potentially a need to have access or an elevated level of access into the environment. But I think the one that concerned me in that particular paragraph was access to the databases and things like that, which I wouldn't anticipate an IT service desk operator to be able to interact with in their day-to-day job. No,
exactly. Least privilege, right? It's easy for us to sit here and throw stones 2 years later. And I don't want people to think we're doing that. We're just simply going through what the commission has published. But, least privilege, this highlights just how important that is. Privileged access management, all of that sort of thing. It just highlights just how important it is. And it is tough. It is really, really hard to go and implement. But there's a reason. There's a reason it's there. And, I wouldn't expect people are having to go and access database. That surely there is a console that can pull that data from the database based around all of that. There's an application across the top of that. So that one is quite concerning as well. I do.
Yeah. And I think probably just to round it out is on the 12th page of the document, it does sort of go through and in quite a lot of detail lists some of the previous penetration testing, internal audit reports, Active Directory risk assessments, internal, security audits, all sorts of different things that have been done by not only Medibank, but also they've engaged vendors to perform these works. But I think the theme along a lot of these was sort of regarding insecure or weak password requirements. I think that was sort of flagged through a couple of them, as well as MFA not being enabled for privileged and non-privileged users. You can go through and have a read of these in more detail, but I think probably the key takeaway from me in this section of it is that when you're engaging these organizations to come and do these tests and these audits and things like that, is you need to implement the recommendations that are coming out the back end of it.
They're not just shelfware. You're paying consultants, and these weren't small consultancy firms, right? I don't want to name them. They were big firms, and if I've had them in to do an audit for me, I'm going to follow their recommendations. If the business can't adopt something, you track it on your risk register, and you make sure that the board and the executive are well aware, so that they know what they're on the hook for. I mean, I'm having a look at point 3 on that page, and it does say a number of individuals had been given excessive privileges to perform simple daily routines, and MFA had not been enabled for privileged or non-privileged users, which was described as a critical defect. So, and that was an assessment from 2020.
Yep, 2 years before.
Yeah. So, that's more than enough time to have been able to start thinking about least privilege and dialing back some of those excessive privileges, especially if it's just for daily routine work.
Yeah.
So, go and have a read. It's eye-opening. So, yeah, I don't want to get myself in trouble. I could say a lot more. I feel for everyone involved. I really do. This is one of the biggest breaches in Australian history. And I'm putting my hat on that if I had been looking after this organisation, or I'd been employed in this organisation, I'm trying to think of what that would have looked like. And I can just imagine there was a lot of politics or something going on that just prevented. There's just so much that wasn't done.
I've seen some people, like one of the other things that was highlighted in there was, I'm not sure which page it was on. I think it basically said that there was talked about the budgets assigned for cybersecurity. Yes, here we go. For the FY22 information technology budget was approximately $4 to $5 million, of which $1 million was allocated to cybersecurity. So I think you've mentioned it before. We're not sort of sitting here criticizing this. I think it's important that this is talked about. I think it's important that everyone, like I said before, everyone involved in security goes and reads this and understands it from that perspective. But we don't know what was going on internally at Medibank when all these, these assessments and these penetration tests and all these were happening. For all we know, the cybersecurity teams there were, going to the board. They were saying, we need to do something about this. We need to do this. And it was not being implemented. So we're not going to know about that. But yeah, it's worth sort of mentioning that they could have been trying to fight for as hard as they possibly can to get all this stuff implemented. But at the end of the day, there's only so much that they could have done.
That's it. And that's not a big budget.
No, so for the size of that organization. Someone actually on LinkedIn did the maths to work out.
I've heard that. I don't want to quote it. It's not great. You can go and find that on LinkedIn, guys. It is out there. And you can do the math as well. It's not hard. We know how many users were affected. So speaking of people in trouble, Broadcom, by way of VMware, are having what looks to be a bad week.
Yes. So 3 vulnerabilities have been addressed by Broadcom/VMware. I won't go into the full details, but essentially we've got a CVSS score of 9.8, 9.8, and 7.8. So 2 criticals and a high. Essentially, 2 of them, which are the critical ones, allowing remote code execution on vCenter. And the third one is a flaw that allows someone to elevate their privileges to root on vCenter. So, yeah, pretty important piece of kit to make sure it's patched.
Yeah, exactly. It's not where you want a threat actor sitting by any means. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just digesting. This only came out very recently. So, yeah, initial publication 18th of June, and that's US time. So, yeah,
hot off the press.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, definitely have a read of this one. If you're running VMware, you need to make sure you're across it because if it's not exploited already, it likely will be. I'm actually, we will put a note in the show notes if it's listed on the CISA KEV as well, because I think that's important to call that out because once something's on there, you know that they've been done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
too early to be listed on the KEV just yet. It was only added to, NVD's been slow lately. It was only added to NVD 5 hours ago.
Yeah. But yeah, if you're running vCenter, go check out the Broadcom article. Check to see what versions are infected. Make sure you patch it. Just in general, make sure your hypervisors are being protected. You should not be able to access them from other servers in the environment. It should be very heavily locked down. We see it all the time in ransomware engagements where threat actors get onto the hypervisors, and you can be running all the best security tools in the world to stop ransomware binaries from being executed on those servers. But if a threat actor's got access to your hypervisor, they can encrypt it on there, and then you won't even see it in the security tooling. So you need to make sure that they're protected.
Definitely. You should know what normal looks like on your hypervisors. If you see anything untoward at this point, I'd be asking questions. It doesn't look pretty. So I can't see it on KEV yet. As I say, I think it is a little bit too early to be listed on the KEV. But they're nearly 10 out of 10s. Won't be long. Let's talk about what we've been seeing. I did say at the top there's a lot we can't talk about. So let's cover off what we can, and we've covered a couple of those points throughout the chat so far. But one we haven't touched on previously is QR code phishing, which I had arguments with people during COVID when we were scanning in to places. I said I would love to print some malicious QR codes and just go and put them on menu tables, right? You create the dummy of the menu, and all of a sudden you get 100 people in a pub ordering food and that never rocks up, and you've got their money and off you go. So those things are still around. I'm surprised it wasn't as serious back then as I thought it would be. But we are seeing a lot of QR code phishing, and that's essentially what we're starting to see at the moment is these QR codes are being used to redirect people on mobile phones and that sort of thing to phishing websites. Can you walk us through in a little bit more detail around what you guys have been seeing in DFIR?
Yeah, so I think with the good point there on terms of the QR code phishing is that because you're taking the user off potentially the trusted device, which is their computer. So, their work is your laptop. It's got all the tools on it. It's got all the monitoring on it. And then you're redirecting.
You're taking them off the network and outside the firewall.
Yep.
Completely unmonitored.
Unmonitored device, which is the phone. So, yeah, it's definitely a quite a big risk out there, and we've seen that in DFIR for a couple of engagements as well, where it's a result of a QR code phishing, and it redirects the user to a credential harvesting site, and they're on their mobile phone. It looks real enough, so you enter your creds.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was in our release we did last week around conditional access control policy, and I had the chat with a client recently. Phishing resistant MFA is a must. The traditional methods of MFA just aren't enough. I had one come up yesterday. I had to re-authenticate into an app on my phone, and I didn't remember hitting the button, but Microsoft Authenticator still came up asking me to do the match. I went, I don't actually recall that. And, I had to, it wasn't until later in the day when I went back into the app that had to re-authenticate, and I went, that's what it was. So, and I'm always conscious of that. So for it to catch me out, that I wasn't 100% sure what it was, it does its job. So I highly recommend that if your organization hasn't had the conversation around adopting phishing resistant MFA, start it. If you want a guide to think about how to start that, I think it'll be generally released is our conditional access control policy recommendations. Grab that from the website and have a look at that. So,
yeah.
And look, we're going to touch on MFA again, but I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, I think I think we've mentioned it previously. It's just VPN without MFA. You just really need to make sure if you have a VPN and you got users ingressing into the environment, especially if your VPN is using your Active Directory for authentication, you need to make sure you got MFA on there. We've seen so many instances where it's using AD to look up, and there's a weak a weak password associated with a fairly common username, and the threat actor is able to get in through brute force password spraying that. So just making sure if you run VPN, make sure you got MFA running on it.
So this just made me think, if we're seeing that, I haven't used it for years. I know Thycotic's changed their name now. Thycotic used to have a free tool called Weak Password Finder. Yeah. And you run that against AD, and it's going to give you all of those weak passwords that are susceptible to rainbow tables, susceptible to cracking, all that sort of thing. I'm sure the tool's still out there somewhere. In its Delinea is the new name for Thycotic now. I'm sure that tool would still be out there. There's other things you can run as well, but you need to do audits of your passwords, especially using SSO. You have to be able to do that. And I know, up above, I did mention using SSO to connect to your VPN and that sort of thing. But you need to make sure you've got strong password policies and all that sort of thing in place. The amount of times we'll onboard a client and they go, we just use default password policies. That's always concerning for me. So start from the ground up, you need to make sure you've got those strong password policies. No point having controls if your basic controls like password strength is not where it should be. And the other one that I wanted us to add in here is VPNs without sufficient logging. So, it's all well and good to have your VPN up and running. If it's not logging and showing you the activity that's occurring on it, especially around authentication into a SIEM solution that is monitored, and you actually take action on what comes out of that SIEM solution, it's ineffective. So you have that conversation, go and look into it. Different firewalls, different providers all have different logging levels. Go and know what you have, know what's available, and make sure it's coming in.
100%. Yeah, we see all sorts of different firewalls during DFIR engagements, and the retention varies. We've got some that last couple of hours. We've had some where they've actually got the logs being sent off to storage platforms and things like that, so we can go back months to look at the logs in there, and that's sort of shown that that brute force password spraying's been going on for quite some time, which I think just sort of highlights again to your point about having these coming into a platform that's actually being monitored, so you can be aware that this is happening.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it's a really tough one. I had a very intense chat with a couple of people about how to make this work. It is a little bit of a tough one to identify user behavior type alerts off of VPN authentication for some of these tools that are out there. Others, as we've said, work better than most. So it's just a matter of identify what you have. If you can't upgrade, if the business won't upgrade, at least just make the best of what you've got. There is enough guidance out there around how to write detections around these things that you can you can find your way through it. So if you're a client of ours, we'll be working with clients to uplift this. It's just one of our more recent learnings out of DFIR is to go and put these kinds of custom, really strong detections in place. So not that we don't have them there already, but what I'm looking is more custom than the generic rules that are specific to the client infrastructure, specific to the client environment. Reduce false positives and just keep that noise down for everyone. So it is a lot of work, but it's worthwhile doing.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Did you have anything else, mate?
No, I think that's everything for today.
Excellent. Well, look, that's all we've got for this week. So thank you for joining us for this episode of TL Blue. If you have any feedback or questions on anything we've covered, feel free to reach out at tlblue@triscollabs.com, or you can reach myself or Richard on LinkedIn as well. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great week.
Thanks for listening all, and we'll catch you on the next one.